The last of the three workflows to be added to EF, the Code-First workflow takes yet another point of view by allowing you to define your model by directly writing the code for your entity and context classes. At runtime, EF will generate from your entity and context classes an in-memory entity data model. The Code-First workflow allows you to define and manipulate the data persistence for your applications in a very natural way as you write the C# code for the app itself. Once you've defined your model, you can then automatically generate the database at runtime. Or you can use a feature called Code-First Migrations to generate the database and keep it in sync with your model as it evolves and changes over time. We'll cover Code-First Migrations in a later course. The Code-First workflow is a natural fit for new application development. That being said, if you have an existing database, you can generate your entity and context classes from your database as a one-time operation. See in the teacher's notes for more information. In contrast to the database or model-first workflows, which can sometimes be tedious to use, developers often find the Code-First workflow to be fun to use. In this course, we'll be using EF within the context of a console application. This will give us an easy way to test and debug our EF code without having to write a lot of unrelated code. Then, in a later course, we'll see how to integrate Entity Framework with an ASP.NET MVC app. Let's set up our project in Visual Studio and get started with using the Code-First workflow to define our model.
Go ahead and open the New Project dialog and select the Console Application Project template. I'll name the project Comic, Book, Gallery, Model, and update the location to be a folder named SRC within the repo that I created earlier. Now we can use the new Git Package Manager to add EF to our project. We don't even need to search for the package. It's the second most popular package at the time of this recording with 22.1 million downloads. To install the package, click the Install button, then OK, and accept the license. In the output window, we can monitor the installation progress. And it's finished now. Let's add our entity class, but first, let's add a folder named Models. This folder will contain all of our project's entity classes. Right-click on the folder and select Add Class. Name the class Comic Book and click Add. I'll go ahead and make the class public. There's no compelling reason at this time to restrict access to this class, and I'll add the following properties. An int property named ID. This property will contain a unique value for each comic book in our system. A string property named Series Title. Each comic book belongs to a series. This property is the title of the series that the comic book belongs to. An int property named Issue Number. Within the series that a comic book belongs to, each issue has a unique number, Issue 1, Issue 2, Issue 3, and so on. A string property named Description. This property is the description for the comic book. And a date-time property named Published On. This property is the date that the comic book was published on. The Code-First workflow uses a set of conventions in order to know how to interpret your entity classes and generate the entity data model that EF will use. For instance, the entity class name will become the table name, either the singular or plural version of the name, depending on how EF is configured. And if the class contains a property named ID, a primary key column with the same name and data type will be added to the entities database table. Because we're using a numeric data type, EF will also make the column an identity column. Identity columns are automatically assigned values by the database when new records are added to the table. Primary key properties can also be named ID using uppercase letters, the class name followed by ID, or the class name followed by ID using uppercase letters. Any of these options will work fine. Whichever one you or your team decides to use, just be consistent. Now that we've seen how to create an entity, let's do a code challenge so you can practice creating your own. After that, we'll add the context class to our project.